Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Music Den. I'm your host, Armando Venditti. Hoping you guys are having a fantastic day and above all else, enjoying you looking after yourselves and one another. Today, ladies and gentlemen, before I get into the topic of what we hope to be another informative, insightful, entertaining episode, I want to welcome back to the channel Mr. Ken Cheshire. How's it going, Ken?
Going well, Armando. Good to be back.
Good to have you back. And Sagosh, how you doing?
Doing good, Armando. Good to see you.
Good to be seen. Good to
Excellent.
see you. Ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be a fun episode. We are going to be doing a band spotlight on the group The Tea Party. Now, funny thing, Jim Bricker was supposed to be sitting in on this episode, but due to circumstances beyond all of our control, Jim was not able to partake in this episode. And a little footnote, the Taylor Swift episode, not happening. It ain't gonna happen. It ain't gonna happen. I'm sorry. It ain't gonna happen. But Mr. Ken Cheshire has graciously agreed to step in and give his thoughts on the Tea Party. And Sagosh also wanted to chime in and give his viewpoints on the band. Now, just a bit about the band. The Tea Party are a trio formed in Windsor, Ontario, Canada in 1990. The band released their self titled debut album in 1991 via Eternal Music. They would go on to sign a major record deal in Canada with EMI Canada. They would also sign a major record deal with Chrysalis Records in the US and the UK and in Europe. They released their major label debut, Splendor Solace, in 1993, releasing their first single, The River, in June of 1993. They have released nine albums to date, one independent, eight major label releases. The most recent release was 2021's Blood Moon Rising, which was released through Inside Out Music in Russia and the rest of Europe. And they have gone on to sell 3 million albums worldwide. In the band, you have Jeff Martin on vocals, guitar, various instruments, and production. Stuart Chatwood on bass guitar, keyboard, harmonium, mellotron, various instruments. And Jeff Burrows on drums, percussion, various instruments. Now, in terms of history with the band, I'll give my history with the band last because it's quite intricate for myself. I'm a big fan of this band, so I wanted to bring more attention to the band because I do believe that they are pretty much Canada's best kept secret. Of course, that's just my opinion and unbiased. Okay. I love this band 100%. But that's neither here nor there. Now, Sagosh, what is your history with the Tea Party?
So I got to know the Tea Party, I think, sometime in the early to mid 2000s, maybe like 2004, 5, around that time, maybe. And I just happened to get this bunch of albums from a friend who was raving about them. And he passed on these, I think, three or four albums: Splendor Solace, The Edges of Twilight, Triptych, and Interzone Mantras.
Okay.
So I think at that time possibly that was all they had. Maybe one or two albums. But yeah, I mean he was very like he gave a very gushing review of the band and suggested I try it out. So I listened to those albums and I really liked what I heard. This was a band that was pretty unique for the time. I mean, this was a time when I was more into indie music and I had developed that aesthetic, the what was happening at the time, the indie bands, the folk rock, the singer-songwriters, or whatever was going on in the 2000s. I wasn't too up to date, but I was more in that zone really. I think more of like Radiohead, Coldplay, all that
Hmm.
kind of stuff. Uh, so this was something that came kind of out of the blue. Of course, you recognize the Led Zeppelin influence quite immediately. but I felt like this band had a lot of character. They were not conventional in any sense. Uh, yeah, I mean the broad aesthetic that they seem to have gone for, especially on these albums, was more of a Middle East and hard rock kind of approach. I recognized a lot of like Eastern and particularly Indian sounding influences, which is always a plus for me.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and around this time, I also got to know that Jeff Martin of the Tea Party had collaborated with one of my all-time favorite songwriters, Roy Harper,
Yes.
on his 2000 album, The Green Man,
Yes.
which I had also heard at the time, and I loved that album. So, further impetus to dive deeper into this band. I
Mm-hmm.
really enjoyed whatever I heard. I think Triptych was probably the album I enjoyed the least, but the other three were almost consistently good. I couldn't really pick out any bad tracks or negatives. They had an interesting sound. Jeff Martin's voice is incredible. I mean, the range and the power that he projects. It's. I felt like although he doesn't like let go and go as wild as Chris Cornell, but I could like feel there are some similarities in the tone and the approach that both of them have to singing. And in fact, I remember at the time after listening to these albums, I remember commenting to a friend that the Tea Party could be described in one line as Led Zeppelin meets Soundgarden somewhere in the Middle East.
Okay, I can hear that. I can hear that. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Okay.
yeah, I somehow worked with one thing and another. I really got around to listening to albums later than this, but the more I listened to these albums, they definitely became a favorite band. I mean, I know too many bands for me to put them in a top 100 or whatever it may be. But yeah, there's certainly a band I like a lot and a band that has some interesting and creative ideas. So yeah, I totally agree with you about being Canada's best kept secret. That more people need to know about this, definitely.
Yeah.
Especially because I don't think their sound is. I mean, it is unique. It is a bit esoteric, but at the same time, it is also very accessible for the average rock fan. And in fact, it comes from different zones. Like there is enough appeal there for somebody who's into classic rock or hard rock or alternative rock or whatever it may be. There is some part of their music that satisfies all those itches, so to speak. So I would say that it is very surprising they are not better.
Yes. Yes. I would agree. And I'm just before I get to you, Ken, about the about your listening experience with this band, I just wanted to point out that shortly after being dropped by Chrysalis, in 1996, they signed a deal with Atlantic Records in the US. They would release their third major label debut, fourth album overall, Transmission, in August of 1997, August 19th to be exact. And that album saw them go into more of a darker, heavier, I would say, I would dare say, industrial sound using tape loops and sequencers, not to a heavy extent. The tape loops for me didn't, or the drum loops, I should say, sorry, didn't overtake the music, sort of augmented it and made it more of a thicker, heavier, darker sound. After being dropped from Atlantic, after the lack of success in the US of Transmission, they would continue to release albums through EMI Canada. And I do believe that the albums were released in the US as imports. They have seen success in areas such as Detroit and Buffalo, New York, and places like that. But in areas like LA, like the main markets, success for some reason has eluded this band. And just before I pass the mic over to Ken, in looking at this list that I gave to Jim, I gave and if I didn't mention this before, I gave Jim 20 songs to listen to of the Tea Party. He edited it down to 10 songs. But in looking at this list, he basically covered a song from every album of in their catalog, minus the indie debut release. So we'll get into this. So Ken, with your you know um, experience of listening to this list, what is your take on this band over like from the just from the beginning, from what you first heard?
Okay, so I'm the newbie amongst the
Yes,
three of us.
yes,
Um, Armando, obviously, I've heard you speak of them many times. Um,
ad nauseam.
and I wanted and I wanted to go into this with a different angle than I normally do for these videos, in that um, I didn't do any background reading. I didn't do any research. I basically just got online in order to find out the album names and the release year, just so I could put them in chronological context as I listened to these 10 songs. Um, uh, yeah, I agree with Shagosh. The Zeppelin influence is unmistakable. I definitely picked up on the Indian influence, which I personally I also do associate with Led Zeppelin too. Um, but I, in general, I associate especially the early albums with basically a strong 70s vibe in general, not just Led Zeppelin, because there's many songs on this list, if not all, that if it's not, I mean, it's like I'm thinking, okay, I feel like I've heard this before. I'm getting flavors of something that I love from the 70s before and just can't, picture what obscure band it was or this, that, and the other. Um, so for the 90s, I definitely felt that 70s influence. Jeff Martin's vocals, that's a solid, very solid baritone voice, lovely tonality, yet can also be subtle. It could also be very powerful with that. He can put that little bit of grit in there just to give it some extra power. The production on all of these are wonderful. Um, and and so it really does pop out. It's whether it's the acoustic guitars, the drums, or I mean, and all of the instrumentation on this album is very, very well done. Um, and they don't um, focus on you know just one primary instrument. Um, whereas some of the acoustic songs are heavily acoustic guitar, but the ones that are more of a full band, the mix and the balance between the instruments are very, very good. Several of these songs demonstrate the tightness of the rhythm section of the bass and the drums together. Um, and so, and then as you get into the late 90s and the 2000s, I start hearing other uh, flavors of other contemporary bands, such as Snow Patrol, which is a very good thing for me because I
You love
Snow
Snow
Patrol
Patrol, yeah.
is one of those few contemporary bands that I continually do like and appreciate their work. So, and other, uh, yeah, just overall, I I wanted to go and listen to start at the beginning with Splendor Solace, and really listen to entire albums until, like I said, my streaming service decided to have technical problems, so I just stuck with these 10. Um,
Okay, okay.
most of these songs I have flagged, for, putting on various playlists, and I'm going to keep this entire list as a playlist on my streaming service. So I didn't particularly have a specific expectation going into it. Um, because there's a lot, since you're my introduction to this band, there's a lot of stuff that we agree on, but there's a fair amount that we don't. So I was just trying to stay, and you know me, I try to be as objective as possible, at least in approach, even though I don't always come out the other end very objective. I enjoy this list. Given the time, I'm looking forward to visiting more of this. Um, I'm picking, like I said, I'm picking up some wonderful 70s. Um, for me, I think a lot of this is the late 60s, early 70s psychedelia I'm feeling without it being full blown,
Yeah, yeah,
psychedelic,
yeah.
but just those flavors that I really do love.
Well, I think we're gonna dive into the list of the 10 songs,
Yeah.
but before we do that, I would like to point out that in 2005, the band went on an extended hiatus. Um, Basically, they broke up, and Jeff Martin first relocated to Ireland, then he relocated to Australia. And this is an individual, as you know, as a musician, singer, composer, producer. He has never put his guitar down for very long in terms of his musical output. He released his debut solo album, Exile in the Kingdom, in '06, released through Kosh Music or Kosh Records. He's also been in other bands, Jeff Martin 777, The Armada, just to name a few. Okay. He's also released solo EPs, Cinnamon Rose and The Seven Deadly Sins, which is his most recent release. So, and the other two members of the band, Stuart Chatwood, would go on to work on music for video game soundtracks. And Jeff Burrows would also form another band in the late 90s called Crash Karma with Edwin of another band called I Mother Earth from Canada. Edwin is lead vocalist. Uh, and but they've always kept their feet wet in music. They've never shied away from being involved in music. Jeff Martin, living in Australia, has his own uh, recording studio that he produces bands in Byron Bay. So, the, and I'll end off by saying this: Jeff Martin specifically, to me, I he reminds me of Slash from Guns N' Roses in that his guitar is never far from him. It's almost like the guitar is a part of him. Uh it's like an extra limb on him in terms of being willing to play at any given time. And he's always gone on solo tours, around Australia. He's doing tours of Canada, acoustic tours. Most recently, he did a tour of playing the songs that David Bowie acoustically. So this is a man that, specifically Jeff Martin, that lives and breathes music. It's a part of him. It's an integral part of who he is as an individual, I feel. But again, I'm gushing. Okay? Um, Shoot me. Okay? I'd love this band. I will love this band until the day I'm no longer on this earth. And I'm getting emotional right now. But that's neither here nor there. But we are going to attack this list that Jim Bricker so lovingly put together for us. I have said of this list that I do believe that this list just scratches the surface of
Yeah.
what this band can offer in terms of their musical ability and output. So, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, the playlist. Okay. Now, Sagosh, when you looked at this list, in terms of the track listing, let's go through the track listing. What is your opinion of the songs on this list in terms of, from 1 to 10, sort of?
It's a good list. I mean, as Ken pointed out, Jim has been fairly thorough in making sure there's a lot of representation. Uh, I was, a bit partial to the albums that I'm already familiar with. The couple of tracks that were a little, not that interesting to me were from some of the later albums, like Heaven Coming Down and The Watcher. I mean, they were all right. I mean, there's nothing on this that's like anywhere near bad, but they just didn't, charge me up the way the others did.
Okay.
A couple of my favorites, which didn't appear in the playlist, I would like to mention, are Raven Skies from Splendor Solis and The Bazaar from The Edges of Twilight. Both excellent numbers, and these are the two. They are like my go-tos for introducing the Tea Party to something. I love both these songs. They're incredible. Apart from that, the one song that was a bit surprising for me was the LOC. Uh, I mean, given that it's much more recent track, I had expected, you know, as bands do, for them to be a little more jaded and not that interesting. But this song was amazing.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. It's fresh. It's interesting. It keeps you glued. It's got these progressive kind of elements, and as well as everything that already makes City Party great. I think that's actually a bit of a standout for me because I mean, while I know and love a lot of the other songs that I'm already familiar with, the fact that an unfamiliar and recent track could grab me, I feel calls for bonus points.
Hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Thank you for that. Okay. Now, can you, your view of this list? Like, we've got 10 songs to basically discuss. And ladies and gentlemen, we're going to do like a free form as we usually do on these episodes. So it's like caution to the wind, grab your coffee, and away we go. All right. Yeah,
Whatever we plan, it ends up being freeform. I
exactly.
agree with Shigosh on the LOC. I also kind of tend to feel a little bit jaded towards material in the latter part of some bands' catalog. I, I, in general, for this list, I think most of the songs, I started to say most of the songs I like best are the early tracks, but that's looking at the list in this context. No, it's it's pretty well across the board. But of course, the Splendor Solace, Edges of Twilight, those tracks do still stand out more to me.
Like this song, like okay, like in this time,
Yes,
lead off
yes.
track on the list.
In this time, the Badger, River, um, Sister Awake, yet I think you had mentioned at some point that The Watcher was their last release before taking a break.
Yes,
I did notice that's one of the, and I didn't take a note which other one, but that had orchestration on it.
yes. That
Um, and I did like this song, The Watcher from Seven Circles. It really gave me some wonderful um, vibes of the band Mercy Me at the time. a contemporary of theirs at the time, because I do love the band Mercy Me, particularly their first four albums, so to speak. Um, and part of that's the music, but part of those are the vocals too. Even though the lead singer for Mercy Me is more of um, um, a little bit more of a tenor than a baritone, but that was a really nice. But I find as it gets into the late '90s, I find some of these songs have a little bit more of a '90s vibe than the '70s vibe.
I mean, like
That
heaven coming down and
Heaven Coming Down, um, Heaven Coming Down from Triptych. You've got that lovely organ in the instruments, and then it breaks into the strong drums and whatever. Kind of
yeah,
associate that a little in this track a little bit more with the '90s sound,
yeah,
which isn't bad because there is some good music in the '90s. I just find that I have to kind of dig to find it in my experience, just because
yeah,
I'm an old curmudgeon. But but yeah, and like I said, the songs that remind me of Snow Patrol, I really do enjoy also. But generally, that '70s psychedelic
yeah,
um, vibes is what I lean to, and there's a good representation of this. You had mentioned that these 10 selections from your original 20 lean heavily into the acoustic feel. So
hmm
that's what makes me really curious about the other 10. But I figure, well, I'm not going to ask for the other 10 tracks. I'm just going to listen to the albums.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but generally, I think this is a nice little, uh, uh, at this point in my experience, a good intro into the band because it makes me want to listen to more.
hmm And
But yeah,
yeah, and ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna add a link in the description to the playlist so you can listen to the songs and give us your opinion on these pieces. Yeah, I when I made this list for Jim, um, I came up with 20 songs. And I gave him a really good cross section. I just didn't want to give him what are known as the hits, the singles. I wanted to give him album tracks that gave a good cross section in terms of the type of music that they played. And he basically edited it down to 10. And um, to me, he put a list together that was more, I would dare I say, a list of songs that are more accessible in terms of the type of music that they were doing. The list starts off with In This Time. For me, that is an acoustic piece. You can still hear the youthfulness, forgive the term, but the youthfulness in Jeff Martin's voice in terms of his approach. But just very beautiful acoustic and very intricate electric guitar playing on this piece. There's also The Badger from '95, From the Edges of Twilight, which is an instrumental piece which uses harmonium in its
yes,
instrumentation. And it's got to be said, when they released Splendor Solace in '93, they were doing a press junket of interviews for their debut release. They had already written Edges of Twilight, ready to go. So this was a band from the onset, was just, they were serious about what they were doing and they
yeah,
were in it for the long haul. But with other songs like Temptation, from Transmission from '97, my favorite album, I should say, ladies and gentlemen, they ventured into more, again, of a slightly industrial, heavier sound with drum loops and sequencers. Temptation for me is a fantastic piece of work. Only 2 minutes and 45 seconds, but and there's a video that you can see on YouTube of Temptation, but just the overall feel of the track, heavier themes of, of isolation, of loneliness, of dealing with temptation, of all sorts of things. We won't even go in there or go there, but just a beautiful and brutal attack musically as to what they could do. Heaven Coming Down from Triptych, their only number one hit in Canada,
Hmm.
which I find astounding. This is a band that have sold 4 platinum albums in Canada, 2 multi-platinum albums in Canada. Just, I find it very interesting how they could only get one number one hit in Canada with Heaven Coming Down. They would follow Triptych up in 2001 with the Indozone Mantras, which, by the way, was recorded in Mississauga, Ontario, at Gilmore Studio. Gilmore, drummer and co-lead vocalist of Triumph, recorded in a mere 3 weeks. And that album was more of a very live off the floor affair in terms of the instrumentation, more guitar driven with songs like Must Must, and but again also singles like Lullaby, which was on the list but was taken off the list. Thank you, Jim. I don't know what you were thinking, but you did that anyways.
Well,
But
Soul Breaking is one of the standouts on this
yeah,
list for me.
Soul
Um,
Breaking,
this is
yeah.
this is one of the ones that, like I said, I got a very strong Snow Patrol um, vibe from this. Um, and the interesting is there was a thing in the 90s and 2000s where the electric guitar would just play just eighth notes, jan, 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 jan.
Yeah.
And I generally find that, I don't want to say boring, um, but uh, but it's boring.
Okay.
and but Snow Patrol is able to use that guitar pattern trope, yet make the song very interesting, and so which I really like.
Hmm.
And so that's one of the things that I think really works here. They take a particular um, genre trope and yet make it very interesting and appealing to the ear.
Okay.
Also, I like to take a step back on Badger, another
The
uh,
Badger.
favorite off of this. Like I said, I love when a band does instrumentals, rock band, because it doesn't happen often.
Hmm.
But I love the Celtic vibes to this.
Yes.
And so when I saw the name of the album, Edges of Twilight, and I'm hearing Celtic, it really makes me curious about the album as a whole.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it's like, oh wait, does this have a running theme through it? Is this, a concept album or whatever? It just really makes me want to check that out.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
anyway, um, yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't
No,
mean to
no, no.
interrupt you on that, but yeah, but
No.
Soul Breaking, I just really, like I say, want to point out is that's one of the highlights of this list.
Yeah. And just with regards to Soul Breaking, the proceeds from the single, they donated to shelters and organizations that help kids that were dealing with physical and emotional and sexual abuse.
Cool.
So they do have their foot in charity work as well. Another release that they did, another single they did called Release from Transmission. Jeff Martin wrote dealing with physical, spousal abuse. So they donated the proceeds from release to the White Ribbon Campaign. The White Ribbon Campaign is an organization that deals with men against violence against women.
Hmm.
Because Jeff Martin has always said in interviews that women are the better species. So he felt that they should do something uh, about the situation about domestic violence and in some cases death in terms of violence against women. So yeah, but in terms of this list, yeah, it basically runs the gamut. Now I will say that in all of the albums that they've released, they do say that Seven Circles, they felt that they kind of got away from what they were doing musically in terms of having outside producers. They worked with Gavin Brown as a producer. Again, they worked with Bob Rock on some songs for this release, and The Watcher being one of them. And they kind of felt that they kind of lost the plot in terms of the music on the album. It is heavy, do not get me wrong.
Mhm.
There is a song that they did on Seven Circles called "Wishing You Would Stay," featuring guest vocal by Holly McNarland, which is a vocalist from the West Coast, a Canadian vocalist from the West Coast. Beautiful track, beautiful track. But in looking at the list, and you mentioned the LOC from the Ocean at the End from 2014, ladies and gentlemen. I'm hearing this song. I'm definitely hearing a Zeppelin vibe on this song.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the song remains the same. You know what I mean? When I hear that song,
Yeah.
I definitely hear the song remains the same. Fantastic guitar work, beautiful drum work from Jeff Burrows, amazing bass work from Stuart Chatwood on this piece. Just breathtaking for me. Other songs of note for me on this list that Jim put together: "A Hole in My Heart" from Blood Moon Rising, heavy as all get out, and vocals featuring Todd Kearns from another Canadian band called the Age of Electric. Todd Kearns would go on to play bass in Slash's band. He's been with him for a few years now, but heavy as all get out. Beautiful guitar solo on this piece, very prominent in the mix. The River, for me, is their debut single on a major label from EMI, and it is just thunder, in 5 minutes. It is just thunderous drums, but beautifully done. Like heavy guitar, just multi-sectional in terms of the guitar break and stuff. Just this is the song that made me sit up and look around. And it's like, oh, okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
okay. And this is a song that I first noticed when I was listening to the Zeppelin set that came out in 1990. The 4 disc set that came out in the pizza box format. Okay, at the time.
Yeah, well, you
And
got strong drums, bass, and you got wah-wah guitars.
yeah,
Strong psychedelic influences in this. I love it.
yeah, yes, yes. And even if you watch the video, very psychedelic with hues of purple and tinting and stuff. Just amazing. Now, for me, the and I'll get you both opinions on this. The standout track for me on this list is track number 10 on the list, Sister Awake from The Edges of Twilight. I'll give my opinion on this track, but Sagosh, what is your view on this piece?
I have to agree. It is an amazing song. I mean, there are a few, basically, all the songs from Splendor, Solace, and Edges of Twilight are the highlights for me on this list. But yeah, Sister Awake really shines through because, I mean, it totally embraces that psychedelic aesthetic and pushes it to the extreme with the sitars and everything. His vocals are so impassioned and so beautiful. I think that's the thing that really sets him apart. Although you can make out that there is a Led Zeppelin influence, but what really sets Tea Party apart is that Jeff Martin's vocals are so like dramatically different from Robert Plant. So for example, if you look at Greta Van Fleet, people associated with Led Zeppelin primarily because the vocals are so much like Plant. It's less about, although they do share the musical aesthetic as well. But I would say that they have just taken some elements from Zeppelin. I mean, it would be pushing it too far to call them in any way imitators or plagiarizers. They have taken some essential ideas that have also been found on the Zeppelin albums. In fact, I would say that the primary aesthetic they have taken even from Zeppelin is largely that of Kashmir.
Yeah.
Like the most Zeppelin you can hear on all Tea Party songs is like a lot of them sound like Kashmiris. It's not like they are doing everything that Zeppelin does. I don't hear anything of that the blues rock side of Zeppelin or the
Right.
the more Celtic side or folk side. Not so much. It's more of that specific Middle Eastern vibe. The way the guitars are approached on Kashmir that you hear over here. But the rest of it is entirely their own, and it is I think it should be highlighted as one of the great sitar songs, Sister Awake.
Yeah. I've got a story, but I'll save that for my take on this. Ken, what is your take on Sister Awake?
Yeah, it's Shugosh nailed it. It's interesting. I'm curious, and I'm going to ask him someday if Jim put these in a particular order, because the list starts out with two shining songs from In This Time in the Badger. You've got Soul Breaking, which I do particularly love, in the middle, and ending with Sister Awake. If this was an album, the sequencing would be, I think, very effective as far as my ears are concerned.
Yeah.
And, to start off with two of their earlier tracks, then progress in, and then follow up at the end with two of the earlier tracks. Specifically, The River and Sister Awake, I thought was very strong, which, as opposed to going strictly chronological, would often have mixed results. But yeah, you get to the end, and that's the one thing about none of these songs are particularly short.
Yeah.
But they go by really fast.
I know.
Listening to them is like, oh, you finish the song, it's like, oh, it's over already, and then you look and see it's almost 6 minutes. It's like, where'd that time go? Because you're enveloped in good music.
Yeah, yeah. I agree with you. I'd like to talk to Jim about like what made him put these songs in this order.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll discuss that, Jim, when we talk
will.
again. But
we'll have an intervention. Yeah.
Yes. Tell us your reasoning, young man. My take on Sister Awake. First of all, they went on a instrument shopping trip for exotic instruments, like Middle Eastern instruments and stuff, for the recording of Edges of Twilight. And on Sister Awake, if I remember correctly, there are 52 instruments played on this track, all played by the band.
Yeah.
They all learned to play these various instruments. And when they recorded the track, they needed 3 recording machines synced up together in order to house all of the instrumentation on this one piece. I can just imagine what it was like to do the mix down on this piece of music. It must have been a mother to get together and just like, but for me, there's no loss of quality in
Yeah.
terms of the instrumentation and just the sheer power and forcefulness, but also finesse
Yeah.
of the instrumentation on this piece, on this song overall. I think it's just astounding. It is just amazing what they were able to do. And to them, and they said to the credit of EMI, they did say in a interview that to a large extent they were left alone by the record company to do whatever the hell they wanted to do musically. There was no pressure from EMI saying
Mm.
we need a hit from you because we need to sell you. They had the support of the record company from the beginning, and they you know, for some reason they just could not crack the US market. The Edges of Twilight was supposed to be started out good in terms of promotion for them in the US, but for some reason the powers that be or whatever, lack of promotion or whatever, or radio, just did not pick up on this band. And I have called them many times Canada's best kept secret. And I agree. Like I stand by that statement. I do not know why this band has not been able to, I guess, for lack of a better reason, lack of a better term, do better in the US than they already have. You know, any thoughts from your money?
Yeah, I think
Follow the money.
to me, the kind of sound that they represent is you know, it is likable, but I can see how it would not, be like universal to the point of being a major hit at that time. Because if you look at the mid 90s, it was like grunge, post grunge, and associated sounds. It was a lot of it was pretty basic. I don't know if they had time for the intricacy that these guys put out. It was, they might have done better in a time when people were, listening more closely to something like progressive rock, when they had time to devote to understanding the intricacies of composition and the way the instruments enhance the music. I think you put it down to like public taste was, for want of a better word, a little dumbed down in the 90s. Let's be honest.
Mm,
I mean, I love a lot of
Yeah.
90s music,
Okay.
but almost all of it doesn't come from the mainstream charts, whether it is rock charts or indie charts. I wasn't really into the happening stuff in the 90s. Nirvana,
Hmm.
all that stuff really didn't appeal to me. And also the fact, I think that they were neither here nor there, in the sense that they were clearly not dumbed down, simple, three chord, four chord power rock music. They definitely did not fit that slot. And the other thing that worked in the 90s, I think, was a more, wilder, screamy kind of sound. Like where I'm heading towards, Soundgarden, who
Yeah.
tasted some success, who were definitely not simplistic, you know. But their sort of selling point was the whole wildness of Chris Cornell's vocals, and
Hmm.
Jeff Martin doesn't let go that way. He's superbly in control, and to some that may be a bad thing, but to me, I think it is exemplary because it takes a lot to go through this whole range of emotional and powerful singing without actually like going over the top and just reducing it to screaming or aggression, things like that. It tells you that he's thinking about the song and not about giving some kind of you know vibe or
Yeah.
rock
Yeah.
metal
Mm.
or whatever it is. He's
Hmm.
not bothered about genres or classification or things like that. He's looking at the song as a piece in itself and delivering it as per the needs of the song. I think that is something that was not there in the 90s. The 90s were very loud, very, over the top. I mean, we may say that grunge killed hair metal and all, but in a sense, grunge created its own loud, aggressive monster.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm honestly not a fan.
Yeah.
I've never been.
No,
So, I mean,
I get that.
people say that Nirvana were needed to kill off Motley Crue. Fair enough, but honestly, I'm not a huge fan of Nirvana either. It didn't do
No.
anything for me at the time. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think they fit the times that they were in. They were a bit too good for their era.
Could be.
I think, mid to late 70s was probably a time when they could have flourished.
Hmm.
Their intensity and intricacy that certainly harks back to those times, because the lack of very synthesizer or electronic driven sound clearly doesn't put them as suitable for the 80s. And like I
Yeah.
said, they're not like loud and aggressive enough for the 90s. So
Hmm.
you know they're very much part of the 70s. Maybe you could call it like heavy progressive rock, because that's really the closest I can come to defining this music.
Okay. Ken, what is your take on
Okay,
us?
theory time.
Okay.
Um,
Let's
of course,
hypothesize. Okay. It's okay.
my phone decided to answer that. The there are lots of stories about the record industry and the radios industry from back in the 50s involving payola.
Yeah.
Record companies paying radio stations to play or overplay their songs. But it still, to a large extent, what was popular was based on record sales, particularly in the days of 45 RPMs. Because, in the beginning, the market was not particularly targeted towards album sales as it was singles, 45s, whatever. And but in the United States, I believe, and this is a general statement, but I think it applies because I've had arguments with various disc jockeys, radio people. There was a progression from what was popular was based on what was being bought to what was popular based on what was being played. In other words, radio stations were not reflecting what was popular, but they were programming what was popular. And there's a disc jockey that used to work in Top 40 Radio, a friend of mine, and we would always get into these arguments. He says, well, people like that, or we play that because people like it, and people like it because they're familiar with it. I'm going, yeah, but everyone has heard a song for the first time somewhere,
Hmm.
and we would just, go round and round, and I still think a lot of the stuff that's popular, it's popular because that's what radio is playing.
Hmm.
And because in the old days, the disc jockeys themselves would program what they played in general. Now, where you've got uh, big corporations owning, you know, um, m- monopolizing the radio stations in all these networks, and they determine the playlist. So
Hmm.
basically, you got a disc jockey that's hired because of their personality, and what he plays is based on what's programmed into the computer,
Yeah.
rather than his particular taste or whatever.
Hmm.
And that's one thing that has really screwed American radio and music. And yeah,
Hmm.
the grunge thing. All of a sudden, grunge in general is popular, and so you know, And that's why a lot of the stuff just hasn't aged well because it wasn't that good to begin with.
Well, I think I agree with you. I think that the term grunge pretty much melted into the term or uh, reformed into the term alternative rock.
Sure.
Because if you look at the shelf life of grunge, it really had a short shelf life between 91 and 93, pretty much, with bands like Nirvana and Pearl Jam and Mudhoney and Soundgarden. But the bands that had musical agility
Yes.
and versatility were the ones that were able to stay
Sure.
and be more relevant. And the Tea Party came out on the tail end of grunge, if you
Mhm.
think about it.
Mhm.
Um, what you know, and, I mean, you both have really insightful views on this. I, I've racked my fat head around trying to understand why this band, the Tea Party, has not hit bigger than they have in the US. They are massive in Australia. Uh, they are huge in other territories in Europe, but and in Canada, but in the US, I don't understand it. They just could not crack the market. I think that from the onset, they were a band that were here to stay. They knew what they had to do. They knew what they wanted to do. They stuck to their guns musically. They never faltered from their musical identity. And when they thought that they were, it was time to reevaluate and go on a break
Right.
and come back with, the last release was Seven Circles in '04. They came back with The Ocean at the End in 2014 with a heavier sounding album with The Ocean at the End, featuring Ian Anderson of Jethro Tull on playing flute on the title track. And
Mhm.
just Ian Anderson, the story of that goes is that they met him in a pub one night in England, and they had a pint, and he liked their music, and he goes, "No, I'll play. Like I'll contribute. Let's do something together." So they have the talent, they have the musical um, durability
Yeah.
to make their mark on the music charts, to make their mark on the music scene in Canada and other territories. Uh, the problem is if a band thinks, or if a radio DJ thinks that a band sounds like Zeppelin or The Doors, they're not going to get very far in terms of what that DJ will play. Little side note, they did open for Zeppelin in 99. I believe it was 99 or 90. No, my apologies. 96 in Montreal. And story from Jeff Martin is they're playing their set, they're doing their bit, the fans are going ballistic. He says he looks to his left, he sees Jimmy Page on the side of the stage. He looks to his right, he sees Robert Plant with his cup of tea getting ready for their set. And all Robert Plant is doing is this, nodding.
Mhm.
To him, that was Robert Plant saying, "Yes, you're
Yeah.
good, and you're not copying what we did in the past. You're
Right.
doing what you know how to do effortlessly, majestically, beautifully, without any hesitation, and you're making it your own."
Yeah.
Right? And then there was another story where after the set, the roadie for Page says, "Jimmy would like to talk to you." So Jeff Martin goes to his dressing room and he's all freaking out. He goes, "Oh shit, you saw my bit." Because he would use, when they did a song called Save Me from Splendor Solace. and it was one of the second single released from the album. And he uses a bow on the strings, like Jimmy did,
Mhm.
Jimmy Page did on Dazed and Confused. So when he goes in to see Jimmy Page asks him, Jeff, how did you get the strings to bend the way they did, the way when you were using the bow? I could
Right.
never do that. I could never manage that. So he's like,
Right.
holy shit. Like instead of being, you know, like
Yeah.
like scolded for using the bow, he's like, how in the hell did you manage to do that with the bow? So and there is rumor that prior to the release of Transmission in 97, he Jeff Martin visited Jimmy Page at his home in England, and they talked about doing some work together. And there
Mm.
are apparently some recordings that were done between Page and Martin, but they have never been released.
Mhm.
So I would definitely love to hear that.
Sure.
Okay. And
Yeah.
apparently Jimmy Page loved the work that they did on Transmission. They loved the work that they did on Transmission.
Well, and this just goes to show that it's, um, playing electric guitar with a bow. Um, Page wasn't the only one doing it at the time.
I know. I know. I
And
know.
a lot of
And
that stuff, they weren't the only ones. They're just the most popular ones that did stuff like that.
exactly, exactly. And another footnote, people who watch the channel know that Bill Schuster and I did a new music discovery segment on the Tea Party discussing the album Splendor Solis. And Bill Schuster said that he preferred, because of the comparison between Jeff Martin and Jim Morrison, uh, Bill has said that he prefers Jeff Martin's vocals to Jim Morrison's vocals. That
Yeah.
there's more dynamic range in his vocal delivery uh, on the album. So um, yeah, so
Sure.
it boggles the mind as to why this band has not been more successful than what they've been in the mainstream. Okay,
Yeah.
um, I mean Eddie Van Halen when they released 5150 with Sammy Hagar, they said they knew it was good. They didn't know if it was going to sell, but they knew that it was good. And his comment was, "Not everything that's good sells." Right? So
We know that.
there you go. There you go. Um,
And not everything that sells is good.
Taylor Swift.
Definitely.
Taylor Swift. And enough of the subliminal messages here, ladies and gentlemen. And just a quick note, ladies and gentlemen, there was a 10-year gap between the release of Seven Circles in 2004 and The Ocean at the end in 2014. In 2011, they reformed, as I said before. They went on a tour of Australia. They released a double live album called Live in Australia, recorded in Sydney and Melbourne. 20 tracks of basically a greatest hits of the Tea Party live.
Mhm.
Pick it up. It's available on Linus Music, on CD, on vinyl, and also there's a DVD of it,
Hmm.
concert. So if you want to listen to it, get it. It is simply amazing. This is a Tea Party done live, unedited, in their full glory. Enjoy. Like
Okay.
really, it's amazing. It's
Yeah.
amazing. So, is there any more thoughts on this band, ladies? I was going to say, ladies and gentlemen, guys. In terms of the,
Well, hmm,
I didn't know your
um,
voice could go that high. Okay,
uh,
but no, in terms of the music that it's been presented to you, what is your view overall of this band, guys?
good.
Sagosh?
Oh, I love this band, and it's interesting you brought up the point of Jim Morrison. I honestly never heard that. I mean, I know
I
Jim
didn't
had
either.
mentioned it before, and that say they're a mix of Led Zeppelin and those. I never heard Jim Morrison in his voice at all. I mean, Jim, he has his place. I was never a big Doors fan, so I'm really not in the cult, so to speak. of Morrison. But I felt like, even if his voice may have had a similar basic timbre, I think Jim always had this sense of aloofness from the music. I mean, he was always above it. He was always speaking from a higher place somehow.
Mm.
He didn't seem to get into the heart of it very rarely. Like that wasn't his thing, so to speak. He was, the whole sort of cult of personality around him revolved around him being something bigger than the music. It was like Jim Morrison and some incidental fellows playing along. That was the impression that was always created on the tour, which was, I thought, tremendously unfair to the musicians that the Doors were outside of Jim Morrison.
Hmm. Okay.
It really didn't seem fair that he hopped on. I mean,
Yeah,
sure,
and
he was the
well, it's got to be said
man around
too. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. It's got to be said too. In the beginning of their career, like around the time of into the recording of and release of Edges of Twilight, they Jeff Martin was a little upset that he kept being compared to Jim Morrison. Yes, he goes, okay, fine, I sing in baritone, but I'm not Jim Morrison, and
Yeah.
I've never planned to sound like him. Um, so yeah, but I think
I think
that,
the key difference is that
sorry, go ahead.
the Jim's whole essence was to be a little bit more dispassionate, and Jeff Martin is just the
Good
opposite.
point.
Yeah, yeah. All right.
You could sense that. I mean, he was like Jim was always had this always had this impression that he was sort of talking down to you.
Yeah,
He was like some kind of
yeah,
Yeah.
high priest or something.
Yeah.
yeah.
But you don't get that sense with Jeff Martin at all. He's very involved. He's very with the music. He's not
Hmm.
above it or around it or in any way
Yeah,
reaching down. He's there.
yeah,
He's in the moment.
yeah, yeah. No, it's true.
Another interesting point both of you made about airplay. I find it very strange that I got into this band just by fluke in the 2000s. They were active in the 90s, and in the 90s, for most of the 90s, I was glued to MTV. Literally glued. I mean, I was spending all day with my TV hooked up to my tape recorder, just waiting. In fact, most of the time, I used to start recording the song and then stop it if I didn't like it.
Yeah.
I was like that obsessed. I had to have everything that was going on, and I was watching all the shows, like the mainstream shows, well, excluding maybe the rap and Headbangers
Yeah,
Ball and stuff. But I was watching all the mainstream stuff, all the chart stuff, all the request shows, and especially the alternative, whatever it was. I keep forgetting whether it was 120 minutes or
Yeah.
100
yeah,
minutes.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, that's where you got to hear all of this kind of left field music.
Hmm.
And I don't remember ever coming across this band.
Yeah,
Insane.
and just to finish, and then I'll get your point, Ken. Yeah, they started out somewhat strong with the Edges of Twilight because it was recorded and produced in L.A. and produced by Ed Stasian, who I did mention at the time. Also had produced Living Colors, Vivid. There was good promise with the release of their lead-up single "Fire in the Head" from Edges of Twilight, but quickly it just evaporated. It didn't really go anywhere. They were all over the Much Music in Canada on TV. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to say ad nauseum because I love this band. I really love this band. But yeah, I can't answer that for some reason. It evaded. It was elusive for them to get airplay in America. So
Well, even in the 60s, there was this whole thing um, about bands from other countries breaking into America.
yeah,
I mean, the Beatles scheduled a lot of what they were doing um, based on breaking into America.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know. I,
I
I,
can't.
I
Yeah.
can't make up excuses for my country in this category.
So, Ken, your final view of the Tea Party and what has been presented to you in terms of music.
Um, I probably have heard the name maybe just a couple of times before you mentioned it. Um, but this is at this point in life, it's a real nice discovery for me. Like I said, I'm literally looking forward to digging in, particularly to the early albums, because this sounds like it's for the most part in my wheelhouse. So yeah, thank you.
You're very welcome. If I can make a recommendation, dig into Splendor Solace, The Edges of Twilight,
Yep.
Transmission. Those three albums,
Okay.
you're off and running.
Okay.
You are off and running.
Fair enough.
And what I like about what I've often said about this band, if it wasn't for this band in the 1990s, I don't know where I would be, like
Yeah.
musically.
Yeah.
They saved music for me in the 1990s.
Cool.
They really did. Um, so there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. A very emotional for me episode on Band Spotlight on the Tea Party. Uh, Canada's best kept secret, as I see him, and Sagosh agrees with me. Please put down in the comments below what you feel about the list that we're going to put in the description for you guys to listen to. And if you know of any more songs that Ken and Sagosh should check out or albums in more detail, please let us know. I really think that this band needs to be talked about more and celebrated more, and just enjoyed and relished more, because they need the spotlight put on them a lot more than it has been in the past. So again, I want to thank Sagosh and Ken for coming on this entertaining and at points confusing ride in terms of where we were going with this list. But you know what? That is the makeup of this channel, ladies and gentlemen. We never know what the hell is going to happen. But you know what? I love doing episodes with these two gentlemen, and they keep me sane and they keep me going. So I want to thank you two for this. And again, thank you for tuning in, and more to come. We've got more episodes that we're working on, and we're going to get them to you as quickly as we possibly can. So click like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Again, to keep yourselves on top of any new content we got coming up. We've got more shows coming up with Jim Bricker and his son, John Michael, and more shows with Ken Sagosh. And Bill Schuster has been in touch with me this past week, and he's coming back on the channel, ladies and gentlemen. He's ready to go for more episodes on the channel. So that's coming up. So we'll talk to you soon. Look after yourselves and one another. We'll see you soon. Have a great day. Bye for now.